my brain melts and I forget everything.
Yeah.
It's the weirdest thing.
Think we're on the internet now.
We're on the internet.
We are, yeah.
Oh, that's a relief.
That's the relief. I'm sitting here all day wishing
I just sit here paranoid that other people aren't listening to our conversations.
Yeah. And now
why aren't
finally
people
they are.
listening to us, Lloyd?
Oh,
Welcome.
Jesus. Yeah, hell yeah.
To the Dice Cast, the seminal RPG roleplay. I said RPG. I can't say RPG and then role playing.
Yes.
The role playing
The role playing game podcast. We should be called Dice Cast RPG. So then we can say that we're the Dice Cast role playing game. Seminal role playing
RPG in the title, you mean?
Maybe at the front and the back.
Like
we need to double down on it.
Like a tagline. It could be the tagline.
Yes.
It goes on all the
branding that we have.
Branding that we that we totally have. Yeah.
All the t-shirts that we sell.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. We should get on some t-shirts, Lloyd.
Yeah. By we, you mean me. I do all the graphics.
Yes. Yes, please, actually, if you wouldn't mind. Just fitting that in the schedule. We were saying we're having busy days lately. Things are catching up on us out of nowhere. Living in unpredictable times.
This is it. Curse in some parts of the world.
It is.
May you live in interesting times.
Do you think a curse befell us in any of our games that we've played in recently, Lloyd?
Yes. Good segue.
Okay. Although I've just realised that applies to all of our games.
Basically all of them, yeah.
All of our games, all of the time. Well, I don't know about you, but I've had a spectacular lineup of gaming over the past couple of days. First, it was Old Ways. Then it was Against the Shadow. And then yesterday, I had my home group, which I'll go into a little bit first because I've been meaning to talk about this for a little while. I have never used Roll20 before. To me, it's always been something that was in the periphery and it looked a little bit too complicated for me. And I thought, I've got enough to plan, before I start a session, let alone working out the grid and the maps and things like that. But now that I've got used to it and put a little bit of downtime into learning how it works, I'm finding it to be really enjoyable. And I wouldn't necessarily say it would work for the kinds of games that we play as well, necessarily, apart from maybe the odd combat.
Yeah, I think the thing is, like, you really see massive dividends from Roll20 because it is great if you're playing normal D&D where there's lots of
normal
fights.
Dungeon, exactly, yes.
Because it speeds up combat really nicely, I think. Excellent at that. But if you,
very much so.
If we play a 4-hour session and there's no combat, there's no need. And I would say out of 10 sessions, 6 of them have no combat, if we're playing.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. It's
but
great.
This one, it is. It's really great. Really very, very good.
Yeah.
And at first I was looking at the assets that they have in the library, like to make your, because it is very much classic D&D. They've got this last session, a great vault had been opened, a bolt from the blue bolt of lightning broke apart this great stone that blocked the doorway to this vault for 1,000 years. So it's the first time this place has been opened, and now not only their adventurers but other adventurers are sort of on like a race to get to the heart of the middle of the vault. Very classic D&D sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of style of play that I play with my home group, and we're used to playing together in person. But because of obviously the pandemic, we decided to give it a go, and we now play more than we would have done if it involved us all getting together. Yeah. And it's great. And then I discovered you can drag your own assets and your own music and everything into it. So that's just been like a really exciting thing to discover.
I remember we, a long time ago, wanted to play Fate of the Norns, which is a beautiful looking game.
Gorgeous book. Yeah.
Not a great mechanical game. I still like it, but I don't think it's not easy to play.
No.
and you have to use runes that you pull from a bag to play, and we had no earthly way of doing that digitally. And then Nicholas Apple made this amazing thing in Roll20 where we could like pull runes from a bag, and like it was all very sci-fi. He like created this whole thing. It's great. I'm really impressed with it, and I use it for my digital home game as well. And it just speeds up so much. People going, okay, what can I do? How do I hit some? If people are new to role playing games, like how do I hit someone with my sword? I'm like, oh, there's a button there. If you click it, like that says sword, does it all for you. Yeah. Amazing, yes. You know, like so handy.
Because one of our recent players, one of my best friends, been good friends for years and years, and I've always tried to get him to play it because I knew he would really enjoy it. But it's hard to describe what these games are sometimes, and I think some people will sort of hear about it and go, "Oh," and I think he was definitely like a bit put off by it at first. But that is another element that has really brought a different dynamic to the game. Not only is it got as a new player that we've never played with before, and he's learning the game, so it feels like a new experience, but also he absolutely has the button that just says attack, and it just works. Yep. It comes up with a number, and I'm like, you hit, you don't hit.
Yes.
It's, man, yeah. So that's just been really enjoyable to explore.
Yeah, I think I would use it if we played a traditional D&D game.
Yeah, agreed.
That was guaranteed to have fights and stuff every session. But it is quite a lot of setup. You're not going to use it, you know?
Huge amount.
Yeah. There's a lot of plugging in things, and you can set up your own fancy macros and shit. Like, it's nice. It's cool, but it's a lot of work.
Yeah, even the stuff that I'm doing is the basic level stuff. But I mean, I've always loved drawing the maps and things ever since I was young. So now having the digital version of dragging tiles on and fitting them and making corridors and thinking, if there's a turn here, they'll be more susceptible to the trap that's just here. And it's a really great experience if you have a lot of time on your hands.
Yeah.
But there we are. Definitely worth a shot if and it's free. I haven't got the paid version. I'm using the free version, so
yep. I think if you're the kind of GM that likes to prep anyway, does a lot of prep anyway, goldmine, you know?
Yeah.
I think if you're lazy, like me, when it comes to prepping, then it's like an additional level of thing you have to do. I don't like to do a lot of prep.
I think you do yourself a disservice because I wouldn't even know where to begin prepping the first proper session of Old Ways.
That's
back to our new
fucking good segue, Rob. Listen,
I'm on
this is
fire,
why they
man.
pay you the big bucks.
This is the big bucks, man.
Yeah. It's really hard to prep a new game.
Old Ways came back, ladies and gents, about 50 years on.
Yeah, 47 years hence.
47 years.
We did a big session 0.5 where we talked about all the things that would happen in those years, which was a great deal.
Yes.
So we're like 2 generations hence from the last game. We moved all that on. And there was just like a very wide amount of things that could have happened in that game. Absolutely no concept what you were going to do. Usually the way that I prep is I run the session and then I ask afterwards, what do you want to do next? And then people tell me what you want to do next, and then I prep that. That was not possible here. So there was a lot of figuring out what maybe they wanted to do, what possibilities there were. So I just sort of prepped around it, I guess, you know, like around the setting and what's where and stuff. And then what I did was I said, okay, here's how I'll introduce everybody, a little scene for everybody to start off with, and then get you to a council where you can decide what you're doing. And as you were talking, I'm just like taking notes and trying to figure
the track
out,
in front of the train.
Yeah, trying to figure out what you might do following that.
Well, I found it very obviously I loved the session. I thought it was wonderful. I was thinking before it actually that it is both help and hindrance that this is kind of a sequel campaign with a lot of history to it. But I thought the challenge was not only are you incorporating what's happened in our campaign that we've played through, so it's sort of ingrained in our memory basically what's happened throughout the previous games. But in addition to using that, you then have this other stuff that we've just talked about and written into a Google document.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of stuff that we wrote down. So obviously that's a lot of material to go from, but I was very curious where we were going to start because, like you say, I didn't know where we were going to go.
Yeah. I thought I could do like everybody gets a little scene to show who they are a little bit. And then from there, sort of just figure out. I thought get you into a council is a smart thing to do because then you can decide. I thought give you the big news, which is not like a spoiler or anything, but it's set in the time of the Blackfire Rebellion, which is a big event in the Game of Thrones world where the king legitimizes all of his bastards when he dies and gave his special sword to one of his sons. And so the realm descends into civil war. So that was like the big news of the session and the whole premise of this like chunk of the campaign. And from there, I didn't know what the hell was going to happen. I wasn't expecting you to go where you were going. I didn't expect the insane plan that followed. Like, I didn't expect any of that. I wasn't anticipating you would go to Ironrath. But actually, it was great in the end. And I did want to talk about religious experiences. Because after the game, Nico said, that's the closest I've ever felt to an actual spiritual moment, which was kind of incredible.
But honestly, there was so much reverence about that. But before we get to that, because that is in itself a subject that we're going to discuss. One, I think a key factor in us going where we were going was that we have basically spent our last campaign setting up and exploring the conflict between High Point, Whitehill. Yeah. And so did you think we would go straight at them?
No, I did not think you would do that. I thought you would get into a council and you'd talk about what side of the war you'll be on. And I thought you would decide that yourselves. But you had too many people in the council who were like, well, we don't get to decide. The Starks get to decide, which is also a fact. Everybody in the North serves the Starks. You can't just do what you're told.
That's true, yeah.
You know. Yeah. But I also kind of considered like, well, not everyone's going to, though. Like, loads of shitty houses are going to take their chance now to maybe free themselves from the shackles of Stark rulership that's been on them for 5,000 years, you know? So I thought maybe there'd be something there. I wasn't anticipating the insane plan that followed.
It is an insane plan. We're effectively baiting a similarly powerful house. We're maybe a bit stronger. We've never really had like a full battle with them at all.
No,
because that would breach the King's peace, obviously. Right. But we know they're roughly on our level.
Your enemy, your big enemy, is them, but you've never actually fought them. It's all been cloak and dagger and like veiled insults and you know, barbed compliments and stuff, which is very Game of Thrones, I think, because you fought the Ironborn loads and you're like, I wouldn't have to worry about them. You know,
they're effectively the fodder, really. Like not taking away anything from those combats because they were amazing, but at least, you know, we can defend our shores against Ironborn without getting a smack on the wrist.
And more now than ever, since it's those 50 years later, like your house has invested a lot into defending itself. So I think it makes sense that you wouldn't be that concerned about it. But it's just funny in the way that like you've had many battles against these people and lost people. You never fought the other people, and you're like, oh well, guess we'll just risk it all.
Yeah, they're quite frightening because we've known from the start that there is some link between them. There's the scar-lipped Kraken, who is this mysterious figure that we kept hearing about. I know we did Conrad Greymane. There we go. That's his name. Yeah, so it's always been that sort of like an interesting potential explosion in the back of our minds when eventually we come to blows with them. But it looks like we're going more and more in that direction.
It's just, you never anticipate such a massive risk early on in a game.
No, it's big.
It's really big, yeah. I'm interested.
We should probably explain what the risk is.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's do that. If you watch Old Ways, and you want to watch it and don't want to get it spoiled, don't listen for about a minute, I guess. They talked about a plan to draw out House Whitehill and to basically lure them into attacking them as they walk from Blackmere to from Carlingwick to Winterfell. And the hope is to try to avoid getting killed and to like draw them out and do damage to them, I guess. Like, yeah.
Yeah, we as the way I interpreted it was we were showing them our flank in a bid for them to be opportunistic and strike out at us, which would give us an excuse to strike back.
Yeah,
because all we need is an excuse with those guys.
Yeah, it's a big gamble, and I think it'll be very interesting. Potentially incredibly dangerous because every character is there, like the Lord and most of his family, and like the daughter is not there, but even so, it potentially could wipe out the house. You know, like if it goes badly. Yeah. So it would also be cool to see like a that show called like The Real Housewives of Blackmere Shore. Like yes. If all the lords die, like they'll just be in charge, which would also be cool. But
would be cool. But absolutely disastrous in terms of the characters we've made and things. There was a certain amount of reverence to the risk we were taking because Caius's character, Vollen Slate, who is now the lord and leader of our party, kept saying, and my character brought it up. He kept saying, "If I am to die, then who will be regency here? And if I'm to die, I would like to be placed here in Ironrath amongst the trees." And I was like, "This guy's expecting the worst here." Yeah, he's on it. But like, the more I thought about it, I was like, no, actually, like he's assessed the risk, and wisely so, I think, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, he's like making that decision. Like he could die, and that would be worth it, I guess.
So, other than Nico's statement at the end of that being the closest thing that he had to a spiritual experience, we went to Ironrath and we saw the Ironwood trees. That's their name, right?
That's it. Yep. So Ironrath is in the Wolfswood. It's like one of the oldest and most unusual sort of castles in that it's made of mostly of ironwood and not of stone. It's ancient and weird, and it's got like a weirwood grove inside, and so stopping there on the way, there was like nice interactions with Lord Forrester, followed by a trip into the weirwood grove and these trees that are like, I guess they're like those sequoia trees, which are like 300 feet tall, like just massive.
Like the redwoods in California, just giant,
just impossibly huge. And there was a weird vibe when we got there. Like everyone was like, "Ooh," all got very serious and quiet, and like I think Lord Forrester found it very peaceful and important to be there, and everyone else sort of picked up on that, and so there was a really irreverence to it, which is interesting because we were just like making it up, but there was a real feeling of like we are somewhere important. It's like a fact and it is real,
Well, he really did stand out. That particular NPC did very much stand out to me immediately, and there was like a feeling of reverence that was coming from him of the place that he rules from, where his seat is or whatever. So yeah, and the idea as well. I mean, it blindsided me a little bit, but it then brought it immediately back to the similar vibe to when we've interacted with the Weirwoods and things like that, because it is the spiritual place of the north, really, isn't it? And it brought it crashing back to me that this is still old ways, but it's in a completely different place with completely different characters, yet somehow there's a continuity of tone and mood.
And those traditions are still there.
The traditions, of course.
The feeling was still there. So even though it's 50 years later, these people still have the same reverence for the Weirwoods, and there was still those moments of like thoughts of sacrifice and all that sort of stuff, which was very cool. I thought very interesting. Very pleased with that because that was all from nowhere. Didn't anticipate you would go there or anything, so I was like frantically googling like Ironrath when
you
were in the council. There? Yeah, who lives there? What's going on there? Like, no, they're in the Game of Thrones Telltale Games game.
Yes, I thought they would.
Yeah, that's Hez Forrester.
Yeah.
And so I knew a little bit about it from that, but it's been years since I played that game. And High Point, they're the bad guys in that game.
Are they?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You get to face Lud Whitehill, this fucking terrible bastard who sides with the Boltons.
I don't think I finished it actually. I think because it came out in episodes, didn't it? I think I played like maybe 1 or 2. I know it started with the Red Wedding. It was good.
Yeah, it's suitably grim.
Yes, very much so. But it was nice as well that we came into contact with an ancient house, like one that had been there from the start, like a. I mean, obviously, we talked with the Starks before, so not our first ancient house, but it's rare that we speak with them.
A lot of the houses in the north are really old. Like House Fisher, which you absorbed, they used to be kings, like the Fisher kings of the Stony Shore or whatever. But they've all fallen to shit, you know? But Ironrath and House Forrester are still powerful and still, I think they felt powerful, you know?
They did.
Which is they're supposed to be, I think. At least at this stage still. Before it all goes to shit in a few hundred years.
Do you think it's because we often play in Game of Thrones and Iscloft that it's kind of inbuilt in you as a GM to include those sorts of moments, to include religion and things like that?
Yeah, I think
obviously it's a huge part.
I think we talked about this maybe before, but like magic to us is like, oh, that's cute. But like before, a couple of 100 years ago, magic was like a fact, like a literal fact of how things made sense. And everyone understood that, you know? If you're in the Viking Age, like magic is real, factually real. The gods are real. All that stuff it's not like there are people who are like, oh, I don't really believe in it. Like, you have to. That's why the sky is up, you know? Like, all of the things that we understand now through whatever science or whatever were explained through gods and magic. So it's like everybody was just sure about that. So then you end up with like, I think it's so central to people's lives in Game of Thrones and in Iscloft and in any sort of medieval setting that it feels weird to like gloss over it, you know, and to pretend like it's not a big deal, because it is a really big deal.
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's the thing. It's the basis on which status is based.
Mm-hmm.
King chosen by God.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Or the Light of the Seven.
Mm-hmm. Like who's in charge and why is based on that. Also, like, you know, if you're going on a journey and there's a god of the sea who is easily annoyed, then you sacrifice to the god of the sea. It's the only option you have, you know? So if you're not going to sacrifice to Ran before you get on a long ship, then you're going to die. That's what happens to people who don't do that. You know, that's happened once before and everyone knows it, or at least once before. And so you have to sacrifice. And it's like at the end of Troy where they sacrifice to Poseidon, or they don't, and then they don't get home for 100 years or whatever, you know? Like all that shit's really important to people, and that's why there's so many in Iscloft, so many like sacrifices, because every month nearly there's like a holiday where you sacrifice to somebody to ask them to like, please make the winter less miserable, like please make sure we have enough food so we don't die.
Please have food so we can eat.
Yeah, you know, all that shit is like so central to life in pre-modern times.
It also informs like a lot of motivations from different characters as well, because some people are motivated by their belief and some people use belief structures to extend their own motivations. Like I think Melisandre in Game of Thrones, for example, she has an agenda and she says that she sees something in the fire and convinces other people that she has seen something in the fire. We should follow these words and we should do the Lord of Light's bidding.
Yeah.
You know, the presence of it can be manipulated by the people that exist in those systems as well, which I don't think we've had a character properly be manipulative with the old ways. We've been kind of like,
yeah.
So we've interpreted them in honest ways, I think. Yes. I don't know.
Well, the thing is, the old gods, especially in Westeros, are so personal and individual. So it's not like there's no priest, you know. So there's no one who can really, like, with authority, do anything. Like, if you have priests and bishops and stuff, then you have people who can say, "Well, God said this," but you don't have that. You just have trees that you look at, you know. So there's no one to kind of actually do the manipulating. I think you could have people who like profess to be very devout and say they see things in the trees and then use that, but yeah, it feels somehow less likely or something, you know.
Yeah, there isn't like a church structure for the old way, so you can't then say, "Oh, well, now you're excommunicated for not believing in the old gods," or we're gonna. There isn't anyone to do that. So that's a very good point, actually. Yeah. It would be a personal thing. It would be very much someone working alone if they were going to try and do something like that, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think they'd get very far. I don't think they'd be the kind of person that would respond well to the old way. I think they were always quite honest.
Yes, it's one of the.
It's always honest.
I think it's like a level of honesty and a level of directness and stuff. You know, at least that's how the Starks are at the start of the books. Doesn't get them very far, but good luck.
Do you think there should ever be any intervention from these forces?
It's everything that happens is their doing, I guess, is the way that you would see it, I think, you know, if you believed in it, you know?
Yeah.
So I think, like, I don't know that they're very active. I don't think they're like R'hllor, who is really actively doing things like bring people back from the dead or whatever.
Yeah.
Or setting swords on fire. Like, the old gods don't do that shit. They don't really need your attention, I think, you know? They're not needy gods. They're just like, we're here, we're trees, you can pray if you want, whatever. You know?
You can pray if you want, or not.
Or not.
Whatever.
We were here before you and we'll be here after you, I guess, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's one of the differences, is like the old gods don't really care if you're there. Maybe they do, but they don't seem to.
No.
Yeah, and because you don't have a clergy, there's no like political arm of the old gods, you
know. Speaking of interventions.
Yep.
No such intervention came the other night for one of our party and Against the Shadow, our Middle-earth game.
Indeed. We played session 41 of Against the Shadow.
Such a joke.
And
41.
Yeah. And there was a big battle, and a big battle against the Easterlings, who had moved across into Rohan and had destroyed Rohan, and were now besieging Helm's Deep with whatever was left of Rohan. And the plan was to take people from the armies in Isengard and attack the army of Easterlings to try and save Rohan, which is what ended up happening. There was a lot of combat. We did a whole session worth of combat with 3, one against like the initial goons on the outside, and then sort of more elite core, and then eventually the queen of the Easterlings and her bodyguards and whatnot. And in that fight, Keel's character Glindair, who's an elf, got absolutely wrecked. He got his face half chopped off and he lost 4 fingers.
Well, he got hit to the point that he lost, because using the Isklass system, there's Absorb, which allows you to absorb the brutal critical effects. So you don't take the effects, you just take the damage.
Yeah.
But he'd already used those 2. So yeah, he got crit again twice, didn't he?
Yes. Yep. So yeah, it was nasty. The bad guys that I created had a system of once per day, if you were prone, they could automatically crit you. And they had this like combat system.
Yeah.
Combat system basically to work out to like, they're the best warriors in the Easterling Kingdom, so I thought this is fine. Basically to like fucking deal with anyone who comes with the Queen. And that's what ended up happening. They got him a lot. And then the fight was almost over, and when the Queen was killed, Nazgul arrived. A particular Nazgul, Camel the Easterling, who was apparently the second ever Nazgul created. One of the most powerful. He landed in the battle, and there was much panic about what to do next. And The decision was to run mostly, but that's not actually what ended up happening in the end.
Well, the thought was, and it had been set up in not only existing Lord of the Rings, the books, previous games we played, you cannot outrun a Nazgul when it's on the back of a fell beast because it's flying. And we'd been chased by one through Rohan before, and it caught up with us. And particularly for Faroth wants to, in the last couple of sessions, I think he's been holding back a little bit, not throwing himself in as crazily as he has been in the past, because it's finally dawning on him that he, whether he likes it or not, has to be the symbol of mankind and be the king for people to rally behind. Even though he might not do a good job, he still had to step up for that. So yeah, he wants to get out and survive. He actually is, not taking a suicide run, and instead he let Glindair
do it. Yeah.
Do it. Well, I say I let him. Like, I didn't have any say in the matter. Keel and Taylor were having an excellent back and forth, and I was like, well, I'm not going to stop him though.
Yeah. So the decision basically came down to Faroth used the armband of Tyr Ministar, which is like a Tar Ministar, which is a Numenorian artifact that can sort of do what you need it to do at a cost, and that was done. And then the river, the Deeping Stream, turned into a spectral horse, and it smashed Camel and his fell beast, and they tumbled off and gave you some time to think. I think crucially, I said he tried to get on but couldn't fly, and there was a misunderstanding about if that was it could never fly again because its wing, because in my head the wing was broken. I did say that later, but it would think it was too late. There's a bit of a misunderstanding about exactly how disabled the thing was now. And in that, Glindair made the decision to stay and fight it while everyone else left. And that's what ended up happening. Everybody else jumped on horses, ran away. Baragon got on the back of a Mumakil and started urging it towards the fight. But it's a Nazgul. It's almost ultimately powerful, and it would be a difficult challenge for all four of you together. Never mind just one of you. And it made mincemeat of Glindair pretty quickly.
That's the thing, and you mentioned in this the post that you put up for this episode about pulling punches, and I've never known you to pull a punch, yet for some reason in my mind last night I was like, the other night, Baragon's on the Mumakil driving it towards the two of them having their fight, and I thought that's gonna be it. Like, the Mumakil is gonna smash, and there'll probably be dire consequences, but then maybe that will buy us enough time for Glindair to get away too. And it didn't happen. The Mumakil didn't arrive on time, and the Nazgul literally had already made him vulnerable to necrotic damage, and then did further necrotic damage to him. Put his ghostly spectral gauntlet into the elf's chest and just drained him dead. And I was like, honestly,
there was real shock,
stunned.
Yep. I was screaming in my head, run away, don't fight this thing, run away. But Glindair has tried before to sacrifice himself, and has certainly done so now.
It was because he went after the strange orc in Methedras,
So then I've been thinking since then what to do about this, because the idea of introducing a new character 2 sessions from the end of a campaign of this length feels a bit arbitrary or something. To me, It feels like, okay, who gives a shit about this new person? In a way, because it's we have 40 sessions with you and Baragon, and we have 15 with Anariel and Glindair, and it's you really grow close to these characters, and there are bonds between everybody and whatever. If you bring in a new character, everyone's like, oh, hello there, fellow warrior. welcome to the fight, I suppose. And it like loses a bit of the punch and the impact, I think, in a little bit. I've been thinking about what to do with that. I think I have a plan, but we'll see. I don't want to give too much away.
No, I was going to say, if you've got something out your sleeve, then yeah. I mean, I think whatever you think's best. I personally don't think new characters. I mean, it is, like you say, 2 sessions from the end. So I mean,
I think if we were going to play another
extra work, but
if we were going to play another huge amount of sessions, then it would be perfect. But because it's like only a small amount of sessions remaining, maybe 2 or 3, like introducing a new character, there's no time to get to know a new character, you know?
No, there's not enough time to get to know the character at all.
Then it's just like you're just introducing another body mechanically, basically, you know? Yeah, I've been doing some scheming and plotting, and I'll see what I can figure out. But yeah. Yep, it's one of those things where like it's not the right time to die. The right time to die is in 2 sessions, you know? But that's how it works. That's how it happens sometimes.
Yeah. I mean,
character died in that Isklov campaign, and it all fell apart because there was no one to keep them together.
Yeah, that's true. Oh god, yeah. Yeah, that was pretty disastrous. I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the important part is that we enjoy the game we're playing, and just to make sure everyone's happy with what the circumstances are. I think if everyone's fine with it, then yeah, I trust you. You haven't led us astray in over 41 sessions. So yeah, man. Honestly, I'm just so excited about that game.
It'll be
honestly
sort of spectacular to finally finish it. I think
it's going to be massive.
Yeah.
In fact, I can't believe it. I don't know what it'll be like. I don't know what it will be like to play in Middle Earth but not have those characters. It'll be strange.
We'll have to think about what happens afterwards. I don't know that we can continue playing when the stakes will be so much lower, you know? Like, where can you go after you literally save the world, you know? Like, what, fucking pacifying orcs in Mordor? Like, that's a bit of a step down or something, you know?
Oh yeah, so we just play people mopping up, like the remnants, like the cleanup team.
Yeah.
Maybe that'd be something. I mean, there's something interesting in any game, isn't there? But you're absolutely right. There are no higher stakes than what we've experienced already.
No, it would be like if they did like at the end of Lord of the Rings, there was another movie afterwards, which was just them walking home, you know? And there's nothing happens. Like maybe they encounter the odd orc, really, but like it's like, okay, what was this for? You know, like.
I've just realised I don't have the post up because, as ever on the Dyer's Cast,
we have
post questions.
Loads of questions in the chat as well that we've ignored.
Oh, do we? I haven't even got the chat.
That's okay. Caius, this goes back to the religious thing, so let's get into these. Would you ever have the gods messing around actively in the affairs of men like they do in the Iliad and Odyssey? I would say not the old gods in Game of Thrones and not the Seven, but I would have R'hllor mess around with it. Yes.
And what about Iskloft? Because in Norse mythology, sometimes they're messing around, aren't they, amongst mortals? Would you ever bring them into Iskloft?
Not directly, but I think like you can kind of do a lot of that through implications.
That's definitely happened before. You know? We've had lots of crows and things like that.
Yes, you can have omens and stuff appear at the right time, and I think you can even have like the character that I played in Nico's game, Ingvar, was very lucky because he's a player character, so he like survives things other people wouldn't, and like seems to succeed all the time, and so he created this myth about himself that he's chosen by Odin because he keeps succeeding and he keeps winning and he wins all the duels, and he like, because he's a player character, you know, and so that created its own sort of momentum, and then people did think he was chosen by Odin because he kept succeeding and he wouldn't die and all this stuff, you know. I think you can do that too. Like, so we're talking about smart characters would manipulate belief systems to make themselves more important or whatever. But I think you could do it that way. I probably wouldn't have the gods like actively come in and like do anything. You'd never see a god in Yscloft, you know. But if you won a battle, there might be a thunderstorm or something, you know. I think in like Faerun or like other more fantasy settings, sure. If you had a cleric or something, you know.
Yeah, like I mean, in a recent game, the home game that I was playing in, not the one I was running, there was a number of our players believed in Saint Cuthbert, who is also known as Saint Cuthbert of the Cudgel, because he's all about law and order, and he basically cudgels people into just following the law. He's not a good god, but he's not evil either. He's sort of just like toe the line, do what you're told, that kind of god. That god never appeared, but there was always sort of like admittedly it's a much more jokey game, but there was a reverence anytime one of the characters would use a cudgel in like a street brawl. So there was always sort of like a mention or like or sort of like a suggestion of a god's influence in those ridiculous situations. But it's just a recent example. I think gods, generally speaking, should be off the table.
I think
for the most part.
It depends. Like in a Faerun game where the gods are like tangibly real and like literally give miracles and there is proof of them.
Yeah.
It's different, you know. But I think in a more closer to our reality sort of setting, then you really want it to be like implications or like omens and stuff. I don't want to be definite about like there are gods and they're doing something, you know. Another question: is there a difference between divine intervention and railroading?
I'm gonna say it.
Yeah, here we go.
It depends. Yeah, 100% depends. I think if it's not set up in any way and it isn't predicated by, if it's literally a god beaming like a laser out of a cloud to kill the enemies that are standing before you, then I think to like ensure that you survive, or to say that your cleric will no longer have powers if you don't serve me in this way, that kind of thing, I think's a little bit. Do you know what I mean when a god is used like that?
Yeah. I think for me, often the issue when we play against the Shadow is in situations like what just happened in the game is that Gandalf would have arrived, or you know, like Tolkien is in many ways a pretty bad writer because when his characters get in situations that they can't fix through plot, he just goes, and then someone saves you, you know?
Well, he invented, as we've talked about before, he invented a word for it, eucatastrophe. Like, that's a word that he invented to basically cover his ass.
And I just find that to be like a little bit... It removes the stakes a little bit to me, you know? I mean, I also see that in Middle-earth it makes sense, and people arriving at the right time and whatever else, like, that can happen, and that does happen in Middle-earth. But also it feels a bit anticlimactic. It's like you get to the point of no return, and then it's like, don't worry, somebody else is here to fix it, you know?
I think it's forgivable in Lord of the Rings. It's mythical. It's the lost... the lost mythology, the lost Iliad of like a forgotten culture or something, you know? So like a bit of, is it what Gandalf says, like every tale deserves a bit of embellishment? So perhaps Bilbo writing the Lord of the Rings thought, well, shit, this doesn't line up. And then the eagle showed up, you know? I don't know. I don't mind it so much in Lord of the Rings because it's something that we're used to. And maybe that's just because of nostalgia. But then can you deviate from the established patterns in Lord of the Rings? And I think we have in Against the Shadow, but is it wrong to never do it?
I think it's happened once or twice that you got saved by something, right?
Oh no, we have for sure. It has happened, but I'm saying not all the time.
No,
like there have been times when it could have. There could have been a eucatastrophe and it didn't happen.
Which I think maybe to me is more interesting because I guess if you know the story of Lord of the Rings, you kind of know that the moments that are going to be dangerous, like they'll get out of it, you know, to some extent. I think it's even worse in The Hobbit is where it's like most notable. Like Gandalf goes away for some reason and then there's a problem and then Gandalf comes back and saves them. That happens all the time, you know? That's like not.
That's a very good point. He didn't write characters that could really. Well, be careful. I need to be careful what I say here. A lot of the time, you're absolutely right. Bilbo does need saving quite a lot. But I don't know. But then he gets knocked out in the Battle of Five Armies, isn't he? So he isn't even present for like the final.
Goes to sleep.
Just goes to sleep.
Yeah.
Skip over that.
Okay, what else we got?
Weird. Yeah. Let's. I have actually brought out the chat now.
If you ask a god a question, does the god know as much as the GM?
My brain is just falling out of my ear. If you ask a god a question, does the god know as much as the GM? Oh, so do you just get meta? Can the god say something that's going to happen that you as the GM know? Or would the god know that?
I always kind of think that the gods don't answer directly any questions. You know?
Yeah.
It's always like weal and woe. You know? Like, all paths that you choose could have good and bad results. I always kind of feel like it's kind of pointless asking a god a question because the god doesn't think like a person and is incapable of giving an answer that you can understand to some extent. Like, so then I always kind of think, it's both, you know? I think it depends on the god, I guess, because there's no way that like Thor knows everything that the GM knows. Thor knows about fighting, you know, and battles and whatnot. But I don't think he knows.
When we get t-shirts done, that's what we need on the t-shirts. There's no way Thor knows as much as the GM knows. Putting Thor in his place.
Yeah. Or like, you know, little stupid goblin gods or whatever. Like, they don't know as much as, you know, like, I don't think they know as much as the GM knows. And about the specifics of every situation, no way. But if you ask the goblin god, like, questions about goblins, he'll probably know that, you know?
Like if we were to take and we do of it, we say the moment in Old Ways in Iron Wrath, like that is as much communications from a god, I think you need. Like you get everything from those moments, like the calm, the tranquility, the reverence, like the fact that people feel calmed by being in this area and like reassured and able to think of like grim things but be able to like you know, bravely grapple with those ideas about like, oh, perhaps like this should be where I'm laid to rest, that sort of thing.
I think like the power of the old gods in Game of Thrones is that really they're just a place where you go for introspection. You answer your own questions. You ask questions, and then by processing them in silence, you sort of, you know, I don't know that they're ever giving you answers necessarily.
So then maybe that's the idea. Then maybe the answer is that the god only knows as much as the player knows, and they have to work it out themselves.
It's kind of melting my brain.
Caius philosophically melding us into another dimension there. Do we have other questions? Oh, I opened the Facebook one. Let's see. Okay. Taylor says, as a GM, what is the saddest you've been about a PC death? And have you ever secretly pulled punches or chosen not to target a PC in combat? She then goes on to say, as a player, does a death affect you more when it's your PC or someone else's?
Someone else's for sure. Yeah. I think for me, it's way easier for my character to die than someone else's character to die, I think.
Yeah.
The saddest PC death. That's pretty tough to answer, actually. It's probably an Against the Shadow, I'd say.
I think that as well. I think
it's because most of the games we play where characters die, it's sort of expected that they could and might. You know? Like, if we're playing Old Ways and someone dies, it's like, well, it's Game of Thrones. That happens. People die when they don't want them to, you know? Like Warwick died, and it was like, well, that's what you get when you fight a man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like that's what I remember saying at the time. I've never been more fine about a character's death. I was like, that's what should have happened, and it did. I don't know. Yeah, definitely. I know we've been talking a lot about Old Ways. Well, Nah dying was really sad.
Yeah.
Just trying to think of any others.
Most of it is like, it's Iskloft and stuff, and they're not sad. They're expected, or like, you know.
I got quite sad. I tell you, I did actually get quite sad when I played Matt Click, did a 3-part Star Wars thing when we were all Jedi, and my Jedi sacrificed himself at the end. I got quite sad about that, but it was my decision to do that, so it wasn't like, oh, I felt sad because I got cheated in some way. It was sad because it was like quite a it was an emotional and reverential kind of experience. And he was dead. He was gone, and he faded into the Force. And I was like, man, but it worked.
Yeah, so it's probably sadder in settings that are less death prevalent.
Yes. You know? Yeah. I think that's probably right.
What else we got?
Let's see.
Is there a Loki in Iskloft, and does he stir up shit? Yep. My hair's looking glorious. Thank you very much. Tim is saying that he can play games again. We should play Lore Keepers sometime.
Yes, let's finally put an end to it. We should do that for sure.
Horus Heresy says, maybe the God knows everything, but doesn't mean it's going to answer the question. Sort of what I was talking about a little bit with like, that they give you vague answers, but also they just might not give you the answer if you ask a question that's too specific or interferes with their like plots and schemes and things. You know, they might just decide like, no, actually, I'm not going to tell you that.
Not going to tell you that. Yeah. Why do they need to tell you anything? Why waste their time? That's a very good point. Michael Kennedy on Facebook says, how do you include religion in your games without being preachy? And how do you include deities, actual interventions and presences and minions while respecting player agency? I mean, I think we've kind of...
Without being preachy, I think, like, I don't necessarily play in settings... Well, no, I don't know. I don't think... How am I going to explain this thought?
I just say...
Yeah.
So, in the same way that if I had a character in a game that kept talking about the arcane, like, and kept saying, oh, the arcane is the best academic pursuit he's ever gone under in his entire life, I wouldn't consider him being preachy, because it's a fantasy game. It's a game. And I, you know, as much as you're talking about a religion, you're still talking about a fictional religion. Maybe if you said it in a real world, and then they were actually talking about a real life religion that does affect real life people, then yeah. But then I would say perhaps then assess why you have those in your game in the first place.
That's the key difference, I think. And what I was trying to get at is like, I don't find it preachy when someone is like, you should follow Groomsh, the god of the orcs.
Oh, the drowned god, yes. Yeah. I'm like, God doesn't stop going on about the drowned god every day.
And I actually, like, one of my favorite characters types to play is a priest or like a zealot or a paladin or something. Because I myself am like an atheist, and I don't subscribe to any of that stuff, but I find it interesting to try and put myself in the mindset of someone who is certain about something, like has moral certainty and has like certainty in the way that things are. That's like interesting to play as, you know.
And they're subscribed to a code of living and a code of ethics that they have to judge situations by. It means that you yourself live by certain rules that gameplay may sometimes like challenge you to break, which is also pretty cool. So I wouldn't call that preachy. I would just say it's fiction. And they're talking about fictional things.
Oh, so Connor says, I think the question might be about how to present a religion that isn't just preaching, for example, showing rather than telling. So instead of having someone be like, my God is great, and here are the tenets of that God, like, I guess, how you show that. And I would say, like, to me, it's like little moments of genuine faith. showing that someone prays not for anyone else's sake, for example, or they go through rituals or whatever, not so that other people notice it, but because it's important to them. And I think like courage in the face of things that other people are afraid of because they have a certainty to them, that sort of stuff, maybe.
Yeah, and I mean, when in doubt, the deity will always inform what kind of followers they have. If I'm just trying to think of an example, but I mean, yeah, the drowned god has some pretty messed up,
yes,
traditions, and thus that manifests in having messed up followers, and it all informs.
Yeah, we play a game called Merling Song that's not streamed for many reasons, but one of them is that I play a drowned priest, and it involves a lot of drowning. You know, it involves a lot of drowning people.
A bunch of people.
And also, like, they have that sort of weird, gross Spartan custom whereby, like, you know, children who are malformed or whatever are dealt with in hideous ways, you know? And that was like, it's hard to play a character who believes that so strongly that they can do it. And in that game, my character's niece wanted to be a drowned priest. And then there was a situation where we had to drown a person. And I was like, this is what it's like. It's not all fucking glory and whatever. It's like grim fucking service, you know, to a god that hates you. You know, that's what it's about. So, yeah. I don't know. It's not all glory, I guess, you know?
What else do we have? I think we've got a few more in Facebook. Nicolas Jacquet says, is religion or at least a religious feel necessary in a tabletop RPG? Necessary.
Yeah, we did talk about that. I don't think it's necessary, but it helps to make a world feel real. Because if they're not believing in religion, what are they believing in? Yeah. Most people believe in something, whether it's themselves or science or faith, I guess, you know? People gotta have something.
I'm just seeing if there's anything else. And I saw Kaiser written something else, but I don't think it's a question. He just says, Ironwrath, Godsword, the deer in Mirkwood, and our ritual in the Triumvirate Church in Rob's game spring to mind, and Nico's blots and Hordeland's fetish tents. Oh, so he's just remembering elements of religion that have been in our games, yeah. And there have been many. And like you say, they are very helpful in structuring a world and, presenting a living, breathing system. Is that it?
I think that might be it.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
How do we usually end these?
we just say bye until I press the button.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Bye.